In lesson 5.7, we're going to talk about point slope form. Hopefully by the end of this lesson, you will be able to graph a line and write an equation using point slope form. Just to review, you know that you can come up with the slope and the y-intercept from looking at the graph. On this first one, if we want to find the slope for A, you could find the y-intercept by figuring out where does it cross the y-axis. Here the y-intercept is up at 4 or 0, 4. And then count the slope, figuring out how many do you rise and how many do you run to get to another perfect point, a point that meets right at the intersection. So here I would be going down 1, 2, actually just 1, 2, and then I would be going over 1, 2, 3. So my slope is -2, +3. If I go the other way, I could go up 2, but then I'd be going -3. So I still end up with a -2/3. Then my equation for A would be y equals -2/3 x plus 4. Even looking at B, again, you can see the y-intercept very easily from where does it cross the y-axis. So my y-intercept is 0, -1. Then my slope, how many do I rise over how many do I run? I can see it's like climbing the stairs here. I'm going up 1 over 1, which is just 1. So your equation would be y equals 1x minus 1. You don't normally write a slope of 1. We just know that the 1 is next to x. So that's a review from yesterday. You did this previously. Remember then that you could be given a point and the slope, and you could graph it. Yesterday you were always given the y-intercept and then the slope. But you could use the slope from any point, guys. So here in this first problem, if I give you the point 1, 1, go over 1 and then up 1, right? 1 on the x-axis, 1 on the y. So to the right 1 and then up 1. And then from that point, move with the slope that they give you. So now my slope is 2, or 2 over 1. I'm going to go up 2, +1, up 2, +1, up 2, +1. Remember that 2 over 1 could also be -2 over -1. So I could go down 2, back 1. Once you have a couple points, I would draw your line and extend it out so that the arrows are off of your grid. Send it all the way out. So try the other two problems. So start with the point that they give you and then move with the slope, and you will have your line as well. Try 2 and 3, pause, and then press play to go over it. Okay, so hopefully you did 2 and 3. Here your y-intercept is up at 2, and then you're going down 1, out 2. And this one was a little tricky. The slope was 0. Remember though, that's like walking on a flat line. So if your slope is 0, you would have a horizontal line because there's no grade on this line. So if I'm walking, I'm just having a good old walk because there's no slant. And you could move with that slope from any point that's on that line. So we're going to learn a new form today, and it's going to be the point slope form. But to kind of intro into it, I want you to solve these two proportions, numbers 4 and numbers 5. So pause again and try solving these two proportions. Remember how we solve a proportion. Okay, so in 4 and 5, let's see how you did. When you solve a proportion, you cross multiply, right? So we're cross multiplying to solve each one of these. We're going to use this concept to come up with the point slope formula. Have you seen this formula before? What is it? That's the slope formula, right? So if we wanted to solve this proportion, we would have to know what are we solving for. We're not really solving to get anything fully isolated, but let's do this problem just like we did in 4 and 5. In 4 and 5, we had a proportion, so we cross multiplied. 6 isn't a proportion right now, but it could be. What could you write m over top of to make it look like a proportion? M over 1. So all we're going to do here is cross multiply, but then leave it. We're not going to really solve for anything, but watch this. As I cross multiply, I would have y sub 2 minus y sub 1 on one side, and that would be equal to m times x sub 2 minus x sub 1. So I know this doesn't look like much to you guys, but actually that's all the work that you need to do. This is your new formula that we're going to use. This formula is called the point slope formula. All right, and this is really helpful so that whenever we know a point and a slope, we can come up with the equation. So here's what we're going to do with this, okay? There's two things you always need to know in order to be able to write the equation. You need to know the slope and you need to know a point. If you are given multiple points, you can pick any point to use. The point slope formula is called the point slope formula because you can easily see the slope in the equation, and you can also easily see a point that the line goes through. So the x sub 1 and the y sub 1 come from an ordered pair that the line goes through. And then m is your slope, which they will probably give you, okay? Now, x sub 2 and y sub 2, we don't really like having extra subscripts if we don't need them. So you're going to remember that those are remaining as your input and your output. So I made them blue right here. Those are actually going to be your variables. You need to have an x and a y in your equation. Remember that the point is going to be this x sub 1 and this y sub 1. That would be any point on your line. And the slope is going to be m, as it has always been. So this may look confusing. Don't stress out. Let's try one. If I ask you to write the equation of the line using point slope form, and I give you this information, think about it. We have m, and we have a point. Your point is your x sub 1 and your y sub 1. It's your first x, or the x of your first point, and the y of your first point. So you need to remember the formula. I'm going to give it to you because we're just learning it right now. M times x minus x sub 1 equals y minus y sub 1. All you would do is substitute, guys. So we're going to replace m. What is m? Negative 2. X is staying. That is your variable. You need to have an x in your equation. But x sub 1 is what you labeled right here. It is your first point's x value. So we're going to put x minus 3. That's going to equal, again, you're going to keep the y, and you're going to substitute in 1 for your y sub 1, so you're going to have y minus 1. Now, it doesn't look like a lot, but we look at this equation and we can see that we can see the slope and we can see a point. That's why it's called point slope form. The equation, you're writing the equation in point slope form, so guys, that's it. You would leave it in that form. That's your answer for point slope form. That's it. That's all you do. Now, you could transform this into slope intercept form, and if we wanted to do that, think about it. What does slope intercept form look like? In slope intercept form, it's y equals mx plus b, so we need to isolate my y. In this equation, having some technical difficulties here. In this equation, we would first distribute. Get that negative 2 and give it to everything in the parentheses. We would have negative 2x, and a negative 2 times a minus 3 would be a positive 6. We don't really need these parentheses around the y. There's nothing holding them up, so I would drop them. Then we only have to do one more thing to get y by itself. We would add 1 to both sides, and we would have negative 2x plus 7 equals y. Or y equals negative 2x plus 7. So you have two different forms going on here, okay? You have point slope form, that's this one right here, where you look at it, you see a point, and you see the slope. And then you have slope intercept form. When you look at it, you see the slope. Right away, we can see it's negative 2, and you see the y-intercept. Right away, we know the y-intercept is 7, okay? So I know this is new, but try number 8, and then try solving for the slope-intercept form, and let's see how you do. So in number 8, I think it's very helpful to label everything. So I labeled my m, and I labeled my point. This is my x sub 1 and my y sub 1. Then you have to know this formula that is given to you, but all you do is plug that information in. From there, guys, I would simplify. If you're taking a minus a negative, you're really adding a positive, right? And this is your point slope form. You stop. I can look and see the slope. I can look and see a point. Then to solve for slope-intercept form, you would be isolating y. Get y by itself, and you should get y equals 3/4 x minus 5. Okay, so if I want slope-intercept form from the very beginning, you don't have to use point slope. Okay, if you want y equals mx plus b at the end, you could use this. Remember that x and y are given to you by a point. So if you want your answer in slope-intercept form, you could plug x in, you could plug y in, and don't forget m. So we would have that y is a 1, m is -2, x is 3, and what we would actually be doing here is solving for the y-intercept. So 1 equals -6 plus b. I could add 6 to both sides, and I would get 7 equals b. This is the same problem as we did before, okay? So my y-intercept is 7, but how do I get my equation? Y equals mx plus b. Well, now you know your b. Where does m come from? Don't forget they gave it to you, right? So m is right up at the top, so we have y equals -2 x plus 7. Anytime you're writing an equation, x and y want to stay for the party, okay? X and y, those letters, those variables, need to be in your final answer. So I always say they want to stay for the party. Don't cut them out and don't replace them. If you do replace them in your work, it's okay, but your final answer needs to have x and y in it. If you try number 8, you can pause and then press play to see how you did, but you already know the answer because we did this. It's just, it's the same as the problem right above it. You still get the same equation. So it's your choice whether you start with slope-intercept form or if you start with point-slope form. One last problem. Remember that if you're given 2 points, you can always find the slope. And you need the slope and 1 point to find your equation. In order to find the slope, remember our equation is y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. So if they give you 2 points, you can go through. This is my x from my second point and my y from my second point, and you can plug those in. 1 minus a -3, and then 4 minus 2. 1 minus a -3 is going to give me a +4. 4 minus 2 is going to give me 2, and 4 divided by 2 gives me 2. So now here's the deal, guys. You know the slope is 2, and you get to pick either point. I don't like negatives, so I'm going to pick 4, 1. You could use this information now to substitute. Here's your m, here's your x, and your y, and you can find your equation that they're asking you to find. So it says write an equation in slope-intercept form starting with either point-slope form or slope-intercept form. My preference, guys, is to just keep it like this. Y equals mx plus b. So I just know that I put in 1 for y, 2 for m, 4 for x, and I would have to solve for b first. When I do this, I just have to remember that I'm not done. Your final answer needs to have x and y in the equation. You have to have x and y at the party. Don't leave them out. So if we have y equals mx plus b, we're going to have y equals, you know the slope is 2. That is the same everywhere on the line. You're going to keep x for the party, and then you know your y-intercept is a -7. Now you could start with point-slope formula if you like. I find it easier to stay with slope-intercept form. Try number 10, and I'm going to reveal the answer before the end of this video. So I know that was fast. Please ask questions in school if you have any questions, but hopefully this video helps.